What's up, guys? Welcome to the Chalk Talk. I am Armando Marsal. With me, as always, is Bobby Gomes. My brother, how's it going tonight?
Going well. As you can see, first snow in Boston tonight. So I got my Eskimo hat ready to go.
I see that, man. I mean, unfortunately for the people that are, listening to the podcast, they won't be able to see you, but it's quite the scene. You have an Eskimo hat, eating gummies, and and when you took off the Eskimo hat, there's no hair. So let me tell you, it's been quite the scene today, and it's awesome, man. I appreciate it. It's always fun recording with you, but tonight it's been even more fun thus far. Man, we're closing out the season. Only a couple weeks left. It's gone so fast, man, so fast. I feel like each week, it's still the first week of the NFL, man. But here we are, week 11. We got a 10-game main slate this weekend, which is a good one here. But before we do that, maybe we want to break down this showdown a little bit. Bobby, this game tonight, Seattle hosting the Packers. Give me your thoughts here on this contest, how you're approaching it. Are you playing, the showdown? If so, what are you thinking of doing here?
Yeah, I'm playing the showdown. I haven't kind of figured out what I'm going to do for my cash game lineups for showdown yet. Jimmy Graham revenge night, as we have on the docket, I would say. I just don't think Jimmy Graham's the most vengeful in terms of being in a revenge spot, but should be an interesting game. Green Bay versus Seattle in Seattle.
Yeah, this contest has a 49 over-under here. 70% of the bets are on the over, and the line shifted half a point down. So again, I think some sharp money is on the under here. I wouldn't be surprised if this game does go under. Seattle is a 3-point favorite at home here. Kind of surprising to me, but they are, and the Packers have a 23 implied team total here. There's multiple ways where you can go here. I really like Russell Wilson this evening. He's provided us with a nice floor throughout the season and plenty of upside. When you look at his numbers, he doesn't throw the ball a ton. The yardage isn't super high every week, but for some reason he's throwing multiple touchdowns just about every week. In fact, if you look at it, aside from week 4 against Arizona, Wilson has thrown at least 2 touchdowns in every game. He's averaging nearly 20 DraftKings points per game, and if you look at since week 6, has not scored fewer than 20.5 DraftKings points here. It's going to be tough to put him in your captain, but I found ways to make it work here. I really think that's the route to go. I don't trust the running game here for Seattle. There's just too many question marks, so it does leave me with some concerns. I really think the way they approach this game is going for the pass catchers here. I think Aaron Rodgers is fine. I'm never going to talk anyone off of him. And we know he can get it done against basically anyone. When you look at that, I like Davante Adams. I don't think you need to play Rodgers, but I do think Davante Adams is someone that you want to have in your rosters this week, without a doubt. And then another guy I want to talk about here is, Marcus Valdez-Scantling, man. He should be in for a bigger role. Randall Cobb is not playing tonight. We've seen Valdez-Scantling do pretty well with at least 6, at no less than 5 targets in 5 consecutive games. The volume has been there. The consistency in production has been there. This young kid, man, very, very, very good receiver, and clearly has a very good connection here with Rodgers. Give me your thoughts on any of these guys.
Yeah, so for me, Wilson in the captain spot, I think is pretty interesting. Do we have a word on Carson? He's obviously playing, right?
I believe he's going to play tonight. Yes. I'll confirm that. I'll confirm that, but I believe he is going to play.
Yeah, I kind of like Carson in this spot.
Yeah, he's active.
I don't know if
news just came out 3 minutes ago. Yeah, he's active.
Did they give him the number 1, or is Mike? Is there anywhere?
I believe he's going to get the start. Yeah, I believe he's going to get the start.
Yeah, I kind of like Chris Carson in this spot. I think you can roll him in the captain spot. Russell Wilson, like you said, I think that's a fine play as well. For tournaments, I think David Moore is interesting. Been kind of mentioning his name the last couple shows. Last week didn't do too much versus the Rams. I but it's a new week, and he's had a pretty good year. Right now, I think in terms of Seattle pass catchers, like you can obviously go Tyler Lockett, Doug Baldwin, but I think he's a good pivot off that kind of chalk, especially on the showdown. He's been kind of touchdown dependent, but he's got in the end zone 3 times this year. So, yeah, David Moore would be the guy on Seattle that I kind of have interest in my captain spot in tournaments.
And I think that's an interesting call. I really, really do. He's been someone that, like you mentioned, maybe the volume hasn't been there, but has been someone that scores touchdowns. And at the end of the day, when you're that cheap and you got that kind of upside, it is worth noting. On that note, I like you talked about Jimmy Graham. I like him quite a bit. I think this is a good spot for him. Definitely think he's a viable option. Give me your thoughts here on someone like a Nick Vannett, someone that I think can go completely overlooked and a potential good game environment for him. He has a touchdown in each of the last 2 games. Is someone that, doesn't have a ton of upside or hasn't shown it at least, but does get, some work here. And this is a matchup where I think it can be exploited from his end. And he's only 2,700 when you look at I'm not thinking of rostering him in the captain spot, but when you look at it, he's only 1,800. And I think with him in your lineup, if you're putting someone like Russell Wilson in the captain spot, you can definitely make a lot of it, work and get a very, very unique lineup, because I don't think a lot of people are going to be going Vannett here.
Yeah, no, I think Vannett's pretty interesting, especially if Jimmy Graham's going to be chalk. I could definitely see, like, in terms of tournaments, fading Graham and going a Seattle tight end route to a guy like Vannett, just to maybe show up Graham. Maybe you never know what the whole situation could be. I don't think Graham left, and it was like they obviously didn't want to re-sign him. So, yeah, I get the Vannett call. I like Vannett. You turned me on Vannett early on in the season, and yeah, I think he's a good play. And Dixon as well.
Yeah, it's one of those situations, man, where like in this kind of slate where it's just one game, you got to find a way to get unique and creative, and I think that's one way to do it. He also saves you a ton of salary, which is really helpful, because I think there's a lot of expensive, good options here for them. So just a situation where it's interesting to me, not one that I feel like it's a must by any means. Anyone else in this game? I mean, I think kickers are very viable here because I can see this game where, maybe a pair of touchdowns are scored and then, 2-3 field goals as well from either offenses here. So I do think that, considering how cheap the kickers are in this, slate compared to how they were in last slate, that Giants in San Francisco slate, that showdown slate, the kickers were at 4K. Here at least they're a little bit more reasonable, 3,400 and 3,200. I think Crosby is a very, very strong option here. We see him, attempt plenty of field goals pretty much on a week-to-week basis, at least a couple field goals in games, and then the extra points. I mean, at least 2 extra points in the last 4 games. So definitely a situation where it makes some sense to consider him at 3,200. You get some salary relief. You can fit some of those guys like Devontae Adams and Russell Wilson in your lineup, and you can put a strong captain considering the pricing this week in the showdown. So I like going that route. Defenses, there's just really none here that I feel confident enough to trust. I know you typically point out the good defenses. You've done it before in shows past. Any defense here that stands out to you between these two, or is this just a situation where you're not going to play a defense?
I was just entering in a lineup that has Green Bay defense.
Okay.
I don't know. I think the kickers are really interesting because I've run a couple of optimizers and they're not coming up in terms of in the optimal lineups that I'm getting. So I don't know if other people are in the same. If the same thing's happening to other people, like throwing both Crosby and Janikowski can hit from deep. So I don't mind a kicker in the captain spot at all.
And I think that's a very interesting way to approach it, because if you do that, I definitely think you can load up the rest of the team. And at least the kickers are going to get some points. So you're guaranteeing yourself somewhat, of a somewhat production. Whereas if you go a different direction, aside from a signal caller here, there could be a chance where you don't get any production at all, because even the best of the best have bad games here. So I think that's an interesting approach. So anything else here in this game that, stands out to you, or anything we might have missed? Because this is one of those games where I think it's very straightforward. Just play the stars, or not the stars. Play the regular players here, the studs, and the quarterbacks are both in play. The receivers. I'm not attacking the run game for either offenses. Maybe it's a weakness of mine, but in these offenses, there's really not a workhorse. There's nothing guaranteed. Aaron Jones had a big game last week, but that was against a very bad Miami Dolphins defense. In Seattle, I think they're going to run a 3-man rotation in this backfield. Rashad Penny looked really good last week. Carson's back, like we talked about earlier, and Mike Davis is still in the loop here. So I think there's a good chance that Carson starts, but he might not be finish the night with the best numbers. And then he can also have 20 carries. We just don't know. I don't want to take that kind of chance. I rather someone else make that kind of mistake and let me just kind of guarantee my production. I know Valdez-Scantling going to get looks. I know Devontae Adams is going to get looks. I know Russell Wilson is going to have the ball in his hands the majority of the game. I know he likes to look at Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett's been very productive. That's someone we haven't talked about, who I think is a very strong play here. We know Rodgers is going to have the ball in his hands. And we know the kickers are going to be involved here, because if they're not kicking field goals, they're going to be making extra points. So kind of the way I'm approaching this week, I think it's pretty straightforward. Bobby, Tyler Lockett, Doug Baldwin, I know you mentioned more. If you're listing these receivers, do you have interest at all in Tyler Lockett? Because I do think he's interesting. I think he has big play upside.
No, yeah, I definitely love Lockett if you're rostering him in cash, or you're rostering him in tournaments. In deeper GPPs, I'd probably just pivot to Moore. And then you can definitely have as the captain, and then have Lockett within my lineup. Lockett, Baldwin are fine. I don't have any issue. If you feel the game's going to go that way. And what's the line? 3? Are they home dogs, or are they favorites?
They're home favorites.
Home favorites, yeah. So honestly, my original build was for at least cash was Carson and the captain, and then having Rodgers, Aaron Jones, and Adams with the 2 kickers for cash games. So that's kind of the way I went. I don't mind going Russell Wilson with one of his pass catchers and a running back, and Aaron Jones in the captain spot. I just try to build off the game script in cash games for the showdown.
Yeah, and that to me is pretty interesting there. I'm probably gonna play Lockett in tournaments. I just feel like there's upside there to be had. He's been pretty consistent as far as efficiency. He has pretty much a touchdown in all but 2 games this season. So even when Baldwin returned, the touchdowns did not go away for Lockett. And even when we saw Moore get touchdowns, Lockett was still scoring. So I think there's a ton of upside there. And he has that. We've seen it out of him before. He has that big play upside, which is very appealing. So just something to kind of take into consideration there. Anyone else here? I mean, anything else before we jump into the main slate? Anything else you want to kind of touch on this game before we go?
No, we can jump right into the main slate.
All right. And this weekend, as we alluded to earlier, this weekend we have 10 games on the board. It seems like it's a pretty good slate for sure here. When you look at it, there's a couple of games with some heavy over-unders. Obviously, the best game of the slate or of the week is not on the slate. It's actually going to be a showdown, so I'm pretty excited to check that one out. But still, throughout this week, you got a couple games over 50. Over-under of over 50 points. Several games with at least a 48 over-under here. So there's still plenty of fancy goodness. And let's just I'm really looking forward to this slate, because I think that it's not as straightforward as some may think. There's some pretty solid spots to exploit, and I think that there's going to be other situations where there might be some chalk, and we can maybe just begin with it right here. There might be some chalk in this game, and I don't know if I'm going to be willing to play it. So first game on the board here is Cincinnati at Baltimore. This game right now is one that we're expecting some pretty big news. Joe Flacco is dealing with a hip injury. He has not been able to practice. They did say that even if he misses practice throughout the entire week, that he can still play so long as he's healthy here. So that's something that obviously we're all going to be watching. If he doesn't give it a go, all right, then there's Jackson. Lamar Jackson might start, but he's now dealing with some stomach issues or whatnot. And there's also been some kind of reports that we might see Robert Griffin get the start. If Flacco doesn't give it a go and Lamar Jackson gets the start, which is a possibility here, I think he's going to be very chalky. I don't think I'm willing to play that chalk. I know there's upside. I know that the kid is an athlete. I know he can do a lot with his legs. But I don't know if I'm going to be playing that chalk. Would you?
It all depends. In cash games, I could go there. I'm trying to pay down at the quarterback position in terms of cash. I think like last week, a lot of people are going to gravitate to Newton. People gravitated to Newton on the Thursday, Monday slate last week. I think that Newton will probably be a heavy cash game favorite again this week. But I want to pay down, so I'll probably consider him in cash, but I don't know if I'm 100% going to go there. I like to wait on more clarity for the situation.
Yeah, this is a game where right now there's no Vegas lines. Obviously, the news awaits, and that's probably what's keeping this game off the board right now. So there's really not numbers to indicate what we think. What I do know is that the Baltimore Ravens have a good defense, and to me, I'm going to be considering this defense quite a bit this week. I think they're in a good spot here, with AJ Greenless Cincinnati Bengals. And they're reasonably priced, only 3,200. They did struggle last week against, or not last week, I'm sorry, in week 9 against the Steelers, and they did have trouble at Carolina and versus New Orleans, but this is understandably so. These are pretty good teams. Bengals have not been playing as well as they did at the beginning of the season, so I do think this is a good spot for the Ravens defense at home. Until I get more news here, I'm not gonna be able to really break down this game. If Flacco plays and he's gonna, and he's healthy enough to give it a go, I like this receiving core for the Ravens. I really do think that they'll be in a good spot. John Brown, he's a little pricey, but he has that big play ability, and this is a very vulnerable secondary here. If you look at what he did against his defense in week 2, 4 grabs, 92 yards, and a touchdown, 19.2 fantasy points here, which was very good. Michael Crabtree, he's 4,800. To me, that's too cheap for someone that sees consistent volume like he does. He's seen fewer than 6 targets in just one game this season. Multiple double-digit target games. 7 last week, 5 in week 8, 9, 7. 9 in week 6. So the volume has been there. He just hasn't been that efficient. I think this is a really good matchup for him. So long as Flacco is, the starter. I just wouldn't know how, the quarterback change, how would it affect the target share here for this offense. So kind of waiting on that news. Tyler Boyd really struggled last week when he was chalk. You called it, actually. A good call by you. I don't know what happened. They were perfect game environment, but he only saw 4 targets. This is a much tougher matchup. I don't expect a big game out of it. I'm going to go ahead and avoid him this week, and it has nothing to do with his performance, but more to do with the matchup. I think the volume will be there, but just don't trust him in this matchup. Give me your thoughts here in this game, from this offense. Are you taking the same approach I am? Are you kind of playing the wait and see approach? Assuming Flacco does start, are you interested in this receiving core?
Yeah, I think it's definitely, you have to take the wait and see approach. We don't have a line. We don't have an over under. Like, yeah, I want to know who's playing quarterback for Baltimore before I roster Michael Crabtree or John Brown. John Brown is in a fantastic spot if Flacco plays. If he doesn't play, I still like his ability to get deep, especially in tournaments, and stacking him with Lamar Jackson or Robert Griffin. And I think this would be the week that I might not. I'm still not going to pay up for Tyler Boyd at 7K. I just think they're better spots, but I'd rather roster him this week than rostering him versus at 70. I think this is a better situation. Cincinnati burned the Baltimore pass defense earlier in the year with AJ Green. We did a showdown slate that night. Tyler Boyd was actually in the lineup for that. I think he was in the winning lineup in the captain spot. I think they're gonna pass to beat Baltimore because I don't think they're gonna have much success running the football. So I'm not against Tyler Boyd in tournaments.
Okay, yeah, I can see it because the volume's going to be there, man. But it's just one of those situations like if he couldn't get it done last week in a really good matchup here, I have trouble believing he can do it. And then he's going to see, I believe, Tavon Young. So it's a pretty who grades out above average over at Pro Football.
Doesn't matter.
I'm sorry?
No, but never mind.
So
the defense matter thought process. No, I think it matters. I'd rather him.
Yeah, no, but you're right because the volume's going to be there. He's going to be low owned because recency bias is going to, and he could see, like you mentioned, the run game here might not be effective at all, so they might have to allude to the pass here. And it's just a situation where, he sees 10 targets and no one's going to be on him. And if he breaks one of those for a touchdown, it certainly pay off that salary. So definitely merit to considering it in tournaments. And that's, that's a good thought process area. That it really is. So
I think it would be a better thought process if he was 5,700. He's 7K. That's what I'm saying. Like, if he was cheaper, man, I'd be all over it.
7K. Correct. It's tough to pay for someone who just like shit the bed and excuse my language. He just shit the bed in a phenomenal spot in a great game environment.
Got you last weekend, huh?
Huh?
He got you last weekend.
Yeah, he did. I mean, it was just the perfect scenario, and then now he goes against a tough Baltimore defense, and and he's still 7K. It's not like he's like you mentioned, if he was like in the 6K range, anywhere between 55 and 6,500, I feel a little bit better about it. But just tough to pay up 7K for him when I have Alshon Jeffrey, who I love this week at 6,300. Antonio Brown is only 7,800. I know he gets Jacksonville, but when you got Brown 7,800, you really got to think about that. Any final thoughts here in this Bengals game? I do want to mention before we go, Joe Mixon popped up on the injury report today. I believe it's a knee injury. He was limited at practice. He wasn't part of the media practices, if I'm not mistaken. But so far, it doesn't appear that he's going to, be out on Sunday. But it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Either way, at his 7K price range, I know he's had success in bad matchups before, but this is just not a matchup that I like at all. He had 84 yards on 21 rush attempts against this Ravens defense in week 2. I wouldn't be surprised to see similar performance where it's just tough to get a ton going against this stout defense. So just, wanted to make sure that the listeners are aware that, Mixon is dealing with some issues and it's something to keep an eye on. Any final thoughts on this game, Bobby, before we move on to the next?
If Mixon doesn't go, I think Gio's probably becomes pretty chalky. And in cash games, I'd probably recommend thinking about going there just because he's going to see a full workload at 4,200.
Yep, and even though this is a tough matchup, he does provide a solid floor because of his pass catching abilities out of the backfield. So, and he's, like you mentioned, he's pretty much going to get all the work there. So I agree. I do think if Mixon is out, you could pretty much lock Bernard into your cash lineups with no hesitation. Next game, Bobby. Carolina headed to Detroit. You alluded to earlier that you have some interest here in Cam Newton this week. The over-under in this game is 49.5. It's actually gone down 2 points since it opened at 51.5. 60% of the bets are on the under. The Panthers have a 26.75 implied team total. The Detroit Lions have a 22.75 implied team total. Panthers are 4-point favorites on the road here. Give me your thoughts on this matchup, and give me your thoughts on how you're going to take Cam Newton, approach Cam Newton this week.
Yeah, I think Cam Newton's going to be pretty chalky. The side I like in this game, to be perfectly honest, is the Detroit side. I think Stafford will be an interesting tournament play this week, and Kenny Galladay and Marvin Jones. I like Detroit stacks a lot. I think they're pretty fairly priced. I think Marvin Jones at 5,200, Galladay at 58, and Stafford at 54. This game should be pretty high scoring. It's a total of 49.5. Detroit has a positive game script, so I like that. And yeah, no, definitely you can play Cam. Cam's viable for cash. Funchess, you can use that stack, or you could use Cam with Greg Olsen. I don't have any issues with that. McCaffrey as well. I think they're all pretty much in play. I like this game.
Yeah, it is an interesting game. I agree. I think McCaffrey's in a really good spot. Kerryon Johnson, he just continues to get it done, man. And he's been so much more involved in the passing game. At least 5 targets in each of his last 3 games. Listen, he got it done against a tough Chicago defense last week. A couple weeks ago, he got it done against the respectable Seattle run defense. He did struggle against Minnesota, but that was to be expected. That is a stout defense there, especially up front. So I think this is a pretty good spot. The Panthers have been solid against the running back position this year, so it's not an elite spot by any means. But I really like what I'm seeing here out of Kerryon Johnson. As of late, I like his role in the passing game. That's really comforting here. And it's just a situation where when you see such a talented running back getting more involved in the offense, you got to like it. And then the Panthers, although they've been limiting as far as yardage is concerned, they have allowed 4 receiving touchdowns to opposing backs, which is tied for 3rd most in the league. Just keep that in mind, guys. I think that there's merit to playing him. Like you mentioned, this is a game where even if the game environment is not, even if they're playing from behind, he can catch passes out of the backfield here. So I do think there's definitely merit to playing him. When you look at this receiving core now, Marvin Jones dealing with an injury. He was not present for today's practice when the media was out there with a knee injury. It's a bone bruise, as we know. If he misses, how do you feel? How much Kenny Galladay is too much Kenny Galladay? Like, that's just, I guess, the question at 5,800. 13 targets last game. Got it done against a tough, stingy Chicago defense. This is not the worst of matchups for him. Obviously, the Panthers is not a shutdown defense, and he's going to get James Bradbury here. So I do think he can take advantage of this matchup. 8% advantage rating for him on Pro Football Focus. I think he comes at a reasonable price considering the volume he's potentially going to have in this contest. So I think he's a very strong play this week as well. I'm on board with that. If you're going to take a receiver here for Carolina, who's it going to be?
If I had to take one for Carolina, probably going to lean towards.
I assume Funchess.
I'd rather go Funchess at 5,100.
Yeah, I mean, but if you play Cam, I assume you're going to pair him up with McCaffrey or Olsen.
Yeah, that would be my first. Yeah. Those would be my first 2.
I think if you're going to do that, you just flat out do it with. I mean, stack Cam with McCaffrey, run it back with Galladay, and I think that's a good way to stack this game. Olsen is dealing with a foot, injury here. He was limited in today's practice, but is not expected to play. I mean, is not expected to affect his play this week and his availability. So It's just the same issue he's been dealing with pretty much all season. Anything else here in this game you want to touch base on, or are you ready to move on to the next?
No, I like the carry on Johnson call.
Yeah, I think he could go, kind of overlooked because he hasn't been getting a ton of, runs and he hasn't been that effective in between the tackles in recent games. But 8, 12, and 14 rush attempts. But remember, in week 7, he got 19. I think the recent games have just not been in his favor. They've been on the road, tough matchups. I think, so long as his game doesn't get out of control, I think he could carry the ball here, anywhere between 13 and 16 times. And I could see him getting anywhere between, 4 and 6 targets here in a spot that he should be able to find some success in, and makes for just an interesting tournament play,
With you.
Aside from that, there's really, that's it for me in this game. I don't know if you have any other, final thoughts, or if you're ready to move on to the next one.
Oh yeah, we can. What's up next?
The next game on the board is the Titans heading to Indianapolis to take on the Colts. This game to me is very, very interesting. It opened at 48 over under here, and now we have a 49 over under. 76% of the bets are on the over. The Titans have an implied team total of 24. They opened up at a 22.5 implied team total, so that's going up. Colts have a 25 implied team total, only a 1-point spread here. Listen, Dion Lewis was a disappointment last week. All right, he let us down. He did not do good against the Patriots, but there's a couple things that still stood out to me here. He touched the ball over 20 times, and he played in 75% of the snaps. He was just not efficient. This is a great, great bounce back spot for him. Colts have really struggled against pass catching backs this season, allowing the 3rd most receptions and the 4th most receiving yards to the position. They're allowing over 25 DraftKings points per game. And even if they decide to run with him, they're allowing a little under 100 rushing yards per game. So Lewis is still too cheap at 4,800, if you ask me. Just a great, great situation for him, in my opinion. And I don't know if recency bias is going to force his ownership down. I hope it does. But I just think for someone with his workload and in this kind of matchup, it just makes too much sense to roster him this week. Give me your thoughts here on this game.
No, yeah, I like the Dion call. Corey Davis, again, we've seen the targets. It's the market share in that offense is just through the roof. So I like Corey Davis as well. Marcus Mariota, just the high floor with his legs. He's going to be someone I consider in cash games. And on the other side, I like Luck, like T.Y. I think that's a really good stack. I think T.Y.'s got a pretty good matchup versus Malcolm Butler. So I like that. And he's at home at 6,100. This is going to be a really good spot for T.Y. Hilton. And then, Ebron went off last week. Doyle didn't. I still prefer Doyle. I say it every week, but I think my brain just has to reset and just accept that Eric Ebron is actually good at football, especially in this situation in Indy. So, those are the guys that I'm kind of targeting in this game. I think this is a good game in terms of the over-under, and I think people probably go in some other directions, so you can kind of get value here.
Yeah, and I'm with you, man. I always say Jack Doyle ahead of Ebron just because he's on the field more than Ebron. And Eric Ebron is just so touchdown dependent, when Jack Doyle is active. But, man, he just finds a way, to get it done. He had 3 – so check this out. He had 3 targets last week, and he scored 3 touchdowns, all right? That is absurd. I mean, how does someone have 3 targets and score 3 touchdowns? He rushed for 1. I mean, when I saw that, I said, wow, man, it's just one of those days. If you don't have Ebron, you're not winning any money. And it's a situation where he's so touchdown dependent, but he scores pretty much every game. So it's a tough situation because the volume when Jack Doyle is there is not that high for Ebron. I agree. I think he's good at football. I'm going to stay away from, the tight ends here. I like the Andrew Luck and Hilton call. I think that's a pretty good combination. We know Hilton has that big playability. And you mentioned the matchup against Malcolm Butler is one you like to kind of focus on there. So I can see him burning him for a long touchdown here quite easily. Any interest in the running game here? It's been a little bit more efficient for Indianapolis. Like someone like Marlon Mack, does he call your attention here?
Yeah, Marlon Mack with the targets. I think you have to be interested in his target share. His price is just a little elevated, so that's one thing that it's kind of making me want to go in other directions.
Yeah, now I'm with you there. The price is what kind of concerns me, man.
Yeah, his price is $6K is a lot to pay up for like what he does. I know he's brought in a significant amount of targets in the last couple weeks. So yeah, if you want to go there, I just don't want to pay that price. It's interesting. This game's in a dome, and like we said, like I have the hat on. It's starting to snow around the country. The weather's getting bad. Well, Philly and the New Orleans game, which is probably going to be the game we're hit on later on, that'll be in a dome as well. But the fact that you have a pretty good weather conditions is something to keep in mind, especially in tournaments, depending where these guys kind of end up being rostered for ownership. If they go undervalued, they're in the dome, so it could be high scoring.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty easy to figure out where the majority of the usage is going to go from the Tennessee side here. You mentioned Corey Davis. I think he's going to pretty much by default see a ton of targets. He's seen 10 targets in each of the last 2 games here. I'm not too thrilled about his matchup this week. He does have a tough one-on-one matchup against Pierre Desire. Who grades up way above average over at Pro Football Focus. That said, Corey Davis still has a 15% advantage rating in his matchup, and we know that the volume is going to be there for him. So we also saw him have a very strong game last week in a tough matchup. So he's certainly a talented receiver that can get it done in a below average matchup here. For me, I'm a little bit more bullish on the Tennessee side. I do think Andrew Luck's fine. But this Tennessee defense to me has looked pretty solid. Over the last couple of games, they did a good job against Brady. They just looked okay. They've looked okay here in their last couple of games in not the easiest of matchups. So they did pretty good against Dallas as well. So I kind of respect this defense a little bit more than most, but I still think Andrew Luck is always a viable option simply because he slings it and he does have that upside, and he's also very reasonably priced. So definitely merit into considering him this week. Any final thoughts here on this game?
I think we covered it.
All right, and then the next game is one that will be played in the Dome as well, and that's Dallas heading to Atlanta to take on the Falcons. 48.5 over under here. 26 implied team total for the Falcons, 22.5 implied team total for the Cowboys. 91% of the betting is on the over here. That to me is noteworthy because I don't think I've seen that number all season long. I kind of agree. I do think this game is going to be a little higher scoring than Vegas is projecting it to be at this time. Give me your thoughts here on this game. This is Zeke Elliott. To me, just stands out as one of the better plays of the week. We know that the Falcons tend to struggle against pass-catching backs. They've allowed the second most receiving yards. They've allowed the most receptions, and they've allowed the second or tied for second most receiving touchdowns to opposing running backs this season, giving up the most DraftKings fantasy points per game, as well as 9 rushing touchdowns. So they're giving up a ton to this position, and Zeke is just so good. He has a solidified role in the passing game here with 48 targets on the season, has 34 grabs, if I'm not mistaken, or 35 grabs, 2 receiving touchdowns. Kid's a beast. We know that. He runs the ball a ton in between the tackles as well. I just think the usage is so high, and this is such a good matchup for him that there's very few times that he does not succeed here. Give me your thoughts on this game. Give me your thoughts on Zeke Elliott.
Yeah, I think you just touched on it. Zeke Elliott, week 1, Jay Ajayi, 20 DK points versus the Falcons. Week 2, McCaffrey, 30 DK points versus the Falcons. Week 3, Alvin Kamara, 37 DK points versus the Falcons. Week 4, Gio Bernard, 25 DK points versus the Falcons. James Conner, 37. Week 6, Peyton Barber, 20. Saquon, 26. Adrian Peterson's the only running back that hasn't gone over 10 points 20 points actually versus the Falcons defense. He went for 6. Nick Chubb had 38 last week. Yeah, I'm going Zeke. I'm going to lock him in cash games. I think people might go like to Kamara in cash games. So I like getting both of them in if you can. Those are the 2 guys that I'm probably going to have in my cash game builds at the running back position.
Yeah, man, it's just very tough not to play Zeke this week. I know he's going to be popular. I'm trying to find out here the projection as far as ownership. I wouldn't be surprised if he's over 25% ownership. Yeah, 26 to 30% projected here. Listen, I think that's fine. I'll take that ownership any day of the week here. There's just such a high floor. The usage is so high, and I think he offers one of the higher ceilings in this specific matchup than any running back this week. It's just too good of a spot here, in my opinion. Any interest here, in like Dak Prescott or Amari Cooper? Because I think Amari Cooper is also an interesting play. He's actually been playing really well since joining the team here with at least 8 targets in each of those 2 games, has scored a touchdown, over 13.5 DraftKings points in each of those contests. Clearly has stepped into the number 1 role for the Dallas Cowboys receiving core here and is doing well with it. I still think he's too cheap at 5,400 in a good game environment here. I know he's going to see, Desmond Trufant, but let's be honest here. Trufant hasn't been all that great this season. Not playing at least to the caliber we're used to seeing him play. Still a very good corner, not taking anything away from him. But I don't think he's one of those shutdown corners where you are trying to avoid him at all costs with a receiver, So give me your thoughts here on Amari Cooper and if you have any interest in Dak Prescott.
In tournaments, yeah, Dak, Amari Cooper makes sense. This is another game within the dome. I guess the 3 highest total games in the dome are – 3 of the 4 are in a dome, so you don't have to get too crazy with that Tennessee Indy call. Tampa Bay and the Giants is 51.5. They're not in the dome. I like Dak and I like Cooper. I think for tournaments, they're fine plays. Basically for that reason, I think that you're going to see points in this game, and I think that the game script favors them. So I have no reason not to like a Dak, Zeke, Cooper stack. I don't hate it all.
Yeah, and you can instantly notice it, in Prescott. With Cooper there, he's just playing so much better. Look, the numbers don't suggest, he's playing at another level. He hasn't topped 270 yards since, Cooper has been there. But the 270 yards are the highest of the season, or actually the second highest of the season for him. What does stand out to me, a 67.7 or higher completion percentage in each of the 2 games with Cooper. Before that, the highest he's had all season long is 65.5%, and that was in week 1 against the Panthers. He only attempted 29 passes in that contest. So clearly he's just playing much better, and this could be one of those games where they are chasing points, and he's going to have to throw a little bit more than we're used to seeing him throw. So I do like him quite a bit. I think he's cheap, and I think for tournaments he makes for an interesting play. Heading over to the other side, I think Julio Jones is going to be very chalky, but he's the kind of chalk I'm willing to fade this week. I know he's been playing better, and I know he's an elite receiver and can pretty much get it done against everyone. But let me tell you something. Byron Jones has been playing really well this season, and he's going to be all over Julio Jones this week, man. So I'm a little concerned about that, man. I know he's now scored in back-to-back games. Everyone's excited about that. The guy just has a phenomenal ceiling, but this is a very tough matchup for him. So I'm a little hesitant to, slam all my chips in with him, especially that he's going to be, at least what I'm seeing, he's going to be somewhat popular here He's projected to be anywhere between 17 and 20% owned. I'm okay with passing up on the ownership here and going in a different direction.
Yeah, no, I get you. Julio's not going to be in my player pool this week. Just better options.
Yeah, I agree. I just wanted to get your thoughts here because I do see him projected pretty highly owned. And you know what? I'd rather take the discount on the price discount and take the ownership increase on someone like Odell Beckham against the Bucs. But we'll get to that game shortly. Hooper's in a good spot here. Hooper's in a good spot. Any interest in Hooper in the tight end position here against the Cowboys?
I liked Hooper last week. I used him in Thursday, Monday cash. It worked out. If Sean Lee is not playing, which I don't think he is, I'll have interest in Hooper. If he decides to play, then I'm probably not going to have a lot of interest in Hooper. Even though it's a hamstring injury and he's older, I still think Sean Lee's really good in coverage versus tight ends. Yeah, I like Hooper. Hooper's fine. Pretty much it. I don't know if I can.
Yeah. And it's tough to project like another 11 targets. I mean, that's not ideal here at all. But it's just, it's a situation where, I don't know, I think he could definitely exploit this matchup quite a bit here. Not the easiest of matchups, but the Cowboys are, I believe, top 15 in fantasy points allowed per game to tight ends here. So they're in the middle of the pack. Definitely not a shutdown defense. And we just see those kind of games out of Hooper, where he gets a ton of targets. We saw it, last week. We saw it in week 6. And when he does get that, he's very, very efficient. We saw it in week 5. And if Jones is having trouble getting open, I think Hooper's going to see another heavy load of targets here. So I could totally see a game where that happens, and kind of why I'm interested in him, because I do believe that Byron Jones is that good, and they're going to have to look elsewhere here, to attack this defense, which also has, me somewhat interested in someone like Calvin Ridley. Although we have seen, his production kind of be far less consistent now than it was earlier in the season. And even in good matchups, he has struggled, and the volume has just not been there. So kind of concerning. I'd rather just go with Hooper, who is far cheaper and at least has a little bit more consistent targets over the last 4 games here. Any other thoughts here in this game? Anyone else, Cole Beasley, interest you, or anyone else in the Dallas side of things, or even here, the running game for Atlanta? Any interest there?
I'm not really going to have anything else outside of Zeke and probably Hooper in this game, and maybe some Dak and Amari in terms of like my tournament player pool. And I like Zeke and Cash. That's pretty much, I think we pretty much got on the most of the stuff that I wanted to hit on.
All right. And then on to this next game. Eventually I'm going to get it right with Eli Manning, man. That's just the way it is. And I'm hoping this is the week. This game has a 52.5 over under, and that's the Bucs heading to New York to take on the Giants. Giants have a 27 implied team total. Bucs have a 25 implied team total here. This is just a really, really good situation for Eli Manning. He has not been great this season. In fact, he's been pretty bad all season long, but he's 5,200. He threw 3 touchdowns last week. In week 8 and in week 7, he topped 300 yards. So we're seeing some positive signs here for him, as far as from a fantasy standpoint, at least. This team still looks pretty bad when you look at it. But when you look at the Tampa Bay Bucs defense, man, you just get so excited from the opposing quarterbacks, opposing receivers, opposing tight ends. How do you feel about it? This team ranks 30th in DVOA against the pass. All right. They've allowed the world to quarterbacks this season. In fact, they've allowed pretty much they've allowed 23 passing touchdowns, the most in the league. They've allowed 2,755 passing yards, and they're giving up 26 DraftKings points per game. This is just a smash spot for Eli Manning. It's just a matter of, can he execute? What do you think?
I like Shepard and Cash at 5,300. Saquon's pretty good spot for Cash as well, 87. I think Eli's going to have a good game. Going up against this Tampa Bay defense, there's been a sieve all year, so can't stop a nosebleed. Yeah, I don't mind Eli. Eli, I was considering him for cash games, but I think I'll probably go in a different direction just because I think there's a couple guys who I think their floor is probably higher. Yeah, that's pretty. And Odell, like you said, he's in a great spot. So, like him.
Yeah, and that's the thing, man. He gets Brett Grimes. I mean, he should just have a field day with him. There's just no way Brent Grimes keeps up with him. It's a great spot for this offense, man. It just really is. I think Odell is another chalk play that I'm willing to go ahead and take the ownership on quite a bit here. I agree with your call on Sterling Shepard. I actually wrote him up on the DK flex targets over at Football Diehards. Think this is just a phenomenal spot. His targets have been pretty consistent all year long. I know he's coming off a 3-target game, but he did score, and it was pretty much the lowest targets he has seen in a single game all season long. Evan Ingram is another one that's in a phenomenal spot here against the Bucks. His targets have not been that consistent, but they're trending a little bit better as of late. A position that we will not have Kelsey. Obviously, Ertz is the chalk play. We won't have Kelsey, but aside from those two guys, it's very tough to pick them out. Give me your thoughts here, because the Bucks are giving up the second most DraftKings fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. They've allowed 5 touchdowns to the position. They've allowed the most receiving yards to the position, and top 7 as far as receptions to tight end. So very, very good matchup here for Ingram. I wish we had more consistency out of him from a targets perspective to feel completely comfortable about him. But at least 4 targets in each of the last 3 games. We saw 9 targets in week 8, 5 targets last week. Any thoughts here on Evan Ingram at 4,100?
I like Evan Ingram. I think the price is pretty good. He's definitely, the targets have increased. His market share in the offense has gone up. I don't mind paying for that price for him, especially versus Tampa Bay. But like I said, I think my guy is going to be Sterling Shepard at 53. Tampa's been absolutely horrible versus slot receivers all season long. He makes a lot of work in terms of just builds. If you roster him as a wide receiver, he just at that price tag, it's real significant value, I think.
Yeah. And, of course, we got to talk about Saquon Barkley here. He's not a core play of mine, but I'm never going to talk anyone off of him. He just consistently gets it done. Coming off a subpar performance, I think he's going to go unowned here. Truth be told, the Bucks have been good against the run as far as yardage is concerned, but they have allowed 11 rushing touchdowns, which is tied for second most in the league right now, which is definitely worth noting here. Because Barkley is their red zone guy. So if they get down to the red zone, I wouldn't be surprised to see him get in the end zone here. Not a core play of mine, but definitely someone that if I'm running plenty of lineups will be in my player pool. I'm far more bullish on like you on the passing game here for the Giants. I think Beckham and Shepard are the top 2 plays here. Both will likely be core plays of mine. I'm still debating on how much Eli Manning I want to have this weekend. And there are also some other interesting spots that I like as well. But I do think Eli Manning makes for a solid tournament play this week. Give me your thoughts. We really haven't touched base on the Bucs side of things. I'm not too interested here. I know Fitzpatrick is going to sling it. This sets up to be, a favorable game, favorable matchup for the running game for the Bucs, but just no really running back to be excited about. Peyton Barber, limited with an ankle injury. He's 3,600, going to be very cheap, gets a great matchup, but he just doesn't get a ton of volume. And then we saw Jacquizz Rodgers, 8 targets last week, 8 catches for 102 yards. Highly doubt we see similar production this week, but it is worth noting. There's just not a ton here that I like. I think Howard's in a solid spot, but I just don't like that price tag. So not feeling comfortable paying up there when there are other, players Hooper, who we talked about, even Evan Ingram, who are cheaper than he is, in as good as spots, if not better here. So not a ton for me on the Tampa Bay side. How about you?
Yeah, on the Tampa Bay side, I kind of like Deshaun for tournaments. I like Deshaun every week. I just think that he's a guy that can go overlooked, and just in tournaments with Fitzpatrick as his quarterback, I think he's a solid play. Where do you have his ownership up? Do you have the ownership up?
For Deshaun Jackson?
Yeah, I think Godwin might miss as well, so it would lead me to Deshaun even more.
Yeah, 5 to 8% at this time, but I'm assuming that would adjust. That would increase if Godwin does miss this game. I think we'll probably have that news by Sunday, so I think we would see some ownership increase for someone like Deshaun Jackson.
Yeah, if Godwin doesn't play and he missed practice again today on Thursday, I think Deshaun becomes extremely viable, especially with Mike Evans getting Janoris Jenkins. Mike Evans traditionally has struggled with corners like Janoris Jenkins, so I feel like a guy like Deshaun Jackson will get that usage distribution if Evans struggles and with Godwin out. So I think that's a pretty sneaky stack, him and Fitzpatrick in tournaments.
And listen, we know that Fitzpatrick likes him. At the end of the day, 8 targets last week. He didn't do much with them, but when you look at his numbers at the beginning of the season, man, he was just getting it done. Over 100 yards in the first 2 games of the season with Fitzpatrick under center here. Didn't do much against Pittsburgh. And then in that game against Chicago, he did have 112 yards. But that's a game that Fitzpatrick did not play the entire game. We also saw Jameis Winston. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, most of that damage was done with Fitzpatrick under center. These two have a good chemistry. They have a good connection. And we know Fitzpatrick is not scared to sling it downfield, which is where Deshaun does the majority of his damage. So I agree with you. Definitely an interesting tournament play. And I still think he's cheap. So keep an eye on that Godwin news, because I do think that's going to play a big role here. And if Godwin's out, I think both Deshaun and Howard get a bump, in my opinion, this weekend here. Any final thoughts here on this game, or ready to go on to the next?
We can move on.
All right. And then the next game on deck here is Houston heading to Washington to take on the Redskins. This game here has a 42 over under. Opened at 43. Very, very low over under. One of the lowest of the week, if I'm not mistaken, the lowest of the week. Texans have a 22.5 implied team total. Redskins have a 19.5 implied team total. There's tons of, I guess talent, you can say, from this, or not tons, but there is some talented players here. But this is a game where I'm pretty much staying away from. I have nothing at all from this game. Watson obviously interesting, but I'm not going there. DeAndre Hopkins is obviously interesting, but I'm not going there this week. Do you have any different takes here? Do you have any players you're targeting?
So in cash games, I really like Houston defense. I think they'll probably be the chalk and cash as of right now. That could change come Sunday. Washington's another defense you can consider, and that's pretty much all I have. I'm not really I don't think we need to spend too much time on this one.
Yeah, I agree with you. Texans defense 2,600 is definitely a viable option here. Nothing else here for me as well. Ready to move on to the next game. Pittsburgh is heading over to Jacksonville to take on the Jaguars. The Steelers on the road are a different team than they are at home. This game, though, has a 47 over-under. It's moved down half a point since it opened. 26 implied team total for the Steelers. 21 implied team total here for the Jaguars. I want to have more interest in this game, but I really don't. However, I do like the price decrease here. I think you're getting some pretty good value in players, like Antonio Brown, who is 7,800. I just think that's too cheap when you think about the caliber of receiver he is. In fact, he has not been under 85 or 8,400 all season long. 7,800, just because of the matchup. I think I'm going to go there this week. I know that there's upside because of the matchup, but someone like Antonio Brown can get it done against anyone. We've seen it done. We've seen him do it before. And if I'm going to get a lower ownership, and if I'm going to get a price reduction on someone like him, I'm going to be all over that. So I like Antonio Brown quite a bit this weekend for tournaments because I don't think he's going to have any ownership whatsoever.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I like AB 7,800. Like you said, that price is too cheap, regardless of Ben's home road splits. I think that's a really good call.
Yeah, and he will get Jalen Ramsey, but like you mentioned this last week, like Ramsey's good, but he's shown some vulnerability, this season. And against a receiver like Antonio Brown, when you're not on your A game, man, and you make one mistake, he can make you pay for it. So I don't know, man. I think Brown is just in a smash spot here. Juju Smith-Schuster is also pretty cheap, 6,800. I don't feel that strong about him as I do about Brown, to be honest. But I still think both of them are viable tournament options. I'm just leaning more towards Brown here.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. For me, like I'd probably lean Brown. I like Juju as well. They won't be too like Juju wouldn't be too high for me. I'd probably definitely rather play Brown. Yeah, I think Leonard Fournette's interesting at his price tag.
Yeah,
6,800. Seen what he did to this team in the regular season last year, and he carried it over into the playoffs. Would have had an even bigger game in the playoffs, but he had an injury that he was dealing with. He's been kind of banged up all year. 6,900, I think, is a good price tag for him. I think for tournaments.
Yeah, the price tag is interesting, of course, and we saw the workload be there last week. 24 carries, didn't get much going with him, but he also saw 5 targets and did catch all 5 of them for 56 yards and a touchdown. He averaged 2.2 yards per carry last week, which is concerning. The Steelers have been stout against the run this season, but still, Fournette's volume is going to be there. He's going to be someone that doesn't garner any ownership. We saw his ability to catch passes out of the backfield as well last week. So even if he can't get it going between the tackles, he does have that that ability to catch passes and create create more fantasy points with that. I think that's interesting. Any love for James Conner this week? He's back at practice. He was dealing with a concussion. He has just been so good. To be honest with you, it's tough to ignore him. Look what he did against Baltimore, who's a very good run defense. 107 rushing yards. Also caught 7 passes for 56 yards and a touchdown against him. He's just been getting it done really on a regular basis, regardless of matchup. The usage is through the roof for him. I don't know how much ownership he's going to garner. I don't think a ton, but he's just someone that has been pretty much on fire as of late. And last week, he only rushed for 65 yards on 13 carries, but he got knocked out of that game, and it was just a complete blowout. So they really didn't need his services all that much here. Any thoughts here on James Conner at 7,200?
I think it's interesting just because of how heavy the usage is, and we seen versus Baltimore 2 weeks ago what he can do even versus a good run D when given the opportunity. So I like Conner in this matchup. I don't think do we have a DVOA ranking on Jacksonville versus the other 7th versus the run? Versus pass.
A DVOA against running backs?
Yeah, there's ranked 7th. I don't have an issue with Conner for tournaments.
They're tough. They're tough again. This is a tough matchup. Defense.
I still think I think in tournaments it's fine. If he was a little cheaper, I know isn't Kamara at like 8? Is he 1,000 less than Kamara, or is he with Kamara? Kamara's 8,200. She's 1,000.
Yeah, he's a little bit cheaper. He's cheaper than Kamara. And remember, he got it done against Baltimore, and they ranked number 1 in DVOA against the run.
I think that I'm with he's 1,000 less, and he's going to see more usage than Kamara, and Kamara is going to be a lot chalkier than James Conner this week. So as in theory play, I don't mind. I don't mind playing him and trying to fade Kamara that way.
Yeah, and let me tell you, it's just you're getting a price reduction here on all these players, man. And I know the matchup isn't ideal, um, but that's not going to change the usage. That's just not going to change the usage. And I don't know, man. He's done it against tough defenses before, so I think he can definitely do it here against the Jaguars. So I don't know. I maybe I'm buying in too much to this price reduction, but I think that taking players like this and this is a perfect example of pivot plays. You got players that are very, very good in a bad matchup, and you're getting a price reduction on top of that. So I think a lot of these guys make for very strong pivot plays for some of the more chalkier guys. I'm not saying to fade all the chalk, because I've already talked about Odell Beckham and Zeke Elliott being chalk, and I like playing both of them this week. But like for example, someone like Julio Jones is in a tough matchup who's expected to be pretty popular. Pivoting to someone like Antonio Brown, who's not in as good of a matchup, and you're getting a price discount. In a funnel, when you talk about the two guys, you're gonna always take Antonio Brown at a cheaper price. So, or in a vacuum, sorry, at a cheaper price here. So, just food for thought there. Any final thoughts here in this game? Nothing for me from the Jacksonville side at all. I mean, there's just aside from maybe like you mentioned Fournette, but aside from that, there's really nothing I like on this offense.
Yeah, we talked about Connor's market share being pretty high, but last week he did see a slight decrease. He ended up leaving the game, and prior to that, they were running other running backs. So they might kind of go easy on him versus Jacksonville. So it might not be the greatest of fade of Kamara or way to leverage Kamara.
Yeah, and that's a good point there. Any final thoughts, or are we ready to move on to the next game? We got 3 more to go.
Yeah, we can move on.
Denver heading to LA to take on the Chargers. This game has a 46.5 over/under. The Chargers are 7.5 point favorites here. They have an implied team total of 27 points. Denver Broncos have an implied team total of 19.5 points. Melvin Gordon, 8,900. Just a phenomenal spot here against the Broncos, who have really struggled against the run this season, allowing over 100 rushing yards per game, 7 rushing touchdowns, over 25 DraftKings points per game to the position. Give me your thoughts here on Melvin Gordon and the rest of this game.
Yeah, Melvin Gordon, I think point per dollar, I have him ranked as the number 1 running back in terms of like my projections. It's just an issue of I would rather play Kamara. I just feel more comfortable going in other situations, and I don't know, it's just like a personal bias I have towards Melvin Gordon that I probably need to get over. I just think I just don't usually roster him, but yeah, I think he's in a really good spot versus Denver run defense that in terms of DVOA like has struggled pretty much all year. In terms of DVOA, they are just pulling up right here. They're 18th versus the run, and they're a little worse earlier in the year. So I think they've kind of improved. Yeah, it's gonna be a tough call on Melvin Gordon for me this week.
Yeah, it's strange because you kind of want to take Melvin Gordon in this scenario and in this matchup, but there are so many other really good matchups. We still haven't touched on 2 other running backs that are pretty pricey that I think are in smash spots as well. You've already alluded to Alvin Kamara multiple times, and I'm with you. I think that's a really good matchup for him and a good game script here, potential game script for him. But it's tough to ignore Melvin Gordon here. I guess it's just pick your poison this week and go with it. We talked about Zeke Elliott at 8,500. He's also in a great spot. The difference between some of these guys, or at least the difference between Zeke Elliott and someone like Melvin Gordon is Gordon's playing at home. So definitely a situation that does favor him. A really, really good matchup for him. Good potential game environment here. So I could see this being a very good game for him. I'm not, I talked about Phillip Rivers last week, and this is not the worst of matchups, but I don't think that they're going to need his services once again. So I don't think I'm going to be going there this week. I still think Allen's fine. Anything for you from anything else from this offense or from the Denver offense?
Divisional game, like I think you could go Sanders. I don't know. I usually like Keenum. Everyone hates Keenum. I just don't think at 4,800, like I don't hate it. Keenum Sanders stack maybe, but outside of that, probably had nothing. Cortland Sutton's gonna see volume at 4,600. The price isn't bad. So I think you could consider those guys. I just don't know if I'm gonna go there. Those would be. Oh, actually, you know what? I kind of like Lindsey a lot at 5,200. Do you have any thoughts?
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Oh,
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I like him. I like him a lot too. I just think that he's someone that's
getting in the lineups. Did you mention Lindsey already?
No. That's why I'm glad you made that call, because I was going to talk about him, after you broke down the Charger side a little bit. But yeah, man, I think he's fine. I think he's, going to see the usage he's been pretty consistent all season long. Whether this game turns out to be a lopsided game or not, he's going to be in there, catching past the backfield. I'm fine with him. I just think that this week it doesn't call for him, so that's why I don't think he's going to be a core play of mine. This week, at least I don't see it, panning out that way. I'd much rather pay less for Dion Lewis, but I plan on paying up for running back this week. So I won't be rostering him much this week, if at all. But definitely someone that should be noted. Any thoughts here on Emmanuel Sanders? He's going to get a heavy workload. We saw the first game without Demaryius Thomas, 9 targets. I'm expecting him to continue to see pretty much a ton of targets. The biggest concern for me here is obviously his matchup. He's getting Desmond King, who grades out to be one of the better corners according to Pro Football Focus. So definitely a tough matchup for him. But I think that's why you see him at 6,200, which is pretty much the cheapest he's been since week 2. I'm not going to make him a core play of mine, but I do think it's worth noting him because the volume is going to be there for him. So definitely something to kind of keep in mind here. Again, Keenan Allen in play for sure. Now the core play of mine. Neither is Phillip Rivers a core play of mine, but definitely someone that you can consider if you want. Anything else here? I'm not going to play Case Keenum. I actually think the Chargers defense is a very interesting defense. I mentioned them last week against Oakland. They were priced up, but I'm okay with that. This defense has just been playing so much better in recent weeks with double-digit fantasy points in 4 of their last 5 games here. So I think there's definitely merit to considering them when you look at this Denver offense not being all that imposing.
No, I know you hate Case Keenum, so I
don't hate the guy. I actually remember I streamed him a couple of weeks ago in my season-long league. We talked about that in the Sunday show. I think it was week 8 against the Chiefs, if I'm not mistaken, and wasn't great, but did not disappoint as much. Guy is just not that great, to be honest with you, and I'm not going to go there. Before we go, any Cortland Sutton love here? We didn't see much from him in his in week 9 without Demaryius Thomas. The matchup was tough. This week, the matchup is not that much better. He's still going to get Casey Hayward, who is a very good corner here. So I don't expect a big game out of him. But just wanted your thoughts on him because I think that's a name that you might see floating around because of the potential volume. Not someone I'm interested in by any means, though.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not pretty much on that play.
Alrighty. Any final thoughts here?
Before we fine. It's just,
Yeah, I want to see it happen before I, plug him in. I took my shot with him against, I talked about him. I didn't, go all in on him in that first game where, without Demaryius Thomas. But he was much cheaper than he is now. So definitely not something, not a player I'm going to be targeting this week by any means. Any final thoughts here in this game before we move on to the next?
No, that was pretty much it.
All right, and we got the Raiders visiting Arizona. This game actually has the lowest over-under of the slate. The Cardinals have a 23 implied team total. The Raiders have an 18 implied team total. I just want to say one thing. David Johnson, we talked about this on Sunday, and we both really, really liked him. We wish we knew a little bit more of what to expect from the passing game. And as expected, Bobby, 9 targets last week, 7 receptions, 85 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdowns to go along with 98 rushing yards here for David Johnson. Coming off the bye week with the new with Byron Leftwich now calling the plays here. I'm expecting him to continue to see a bigger role in the passing game. It's something we've been waiting for all week. I love this matchup here against the Raiders, who have allowed the second most rushing yards to opposing running backs this season, 8 rushing touchdowns to go along with 33 receptions, 371 receiving yards, 3 receiving touchdowns, and nearly 30 DraftKings points per game. I just don't see a situation where Johnson fails us this week. I really like him. I think it's going to be a good game environment as well for him. Going to be chalky, but again, this is good chalk in my opinion. Give me your thoughts here.
Yeah, I think he's good chalk. It's just a matter of I don't know. We liked him last week. I just don't know. Just because KC and I'm sorry, not KC, Oakland, the run defense is pretty terrible. The price is great. I don't know. I just 7,500. I'm still a little nervous about Byron Leftwich calling these plays. So I'll eat the chalk in cash games. I'll probably fade him in tournaments.
Yeah, and I guess you can definitely fade them in tournaments. There's so many good options at running back. I mean, this is a week where I wish, like, instead of having to roster 2 running backs and a flex, I can roster. I wish the roster construction was like 6 flex plays, and you can just roster anyone you want. Because I'd pretty much be loading up on all these running backs this week. Unfortunately, that's not the way it rolls. Another, this is not a game I have a ton of interest in. I do want to make Johnson a priority this week. I think he's in a phenomenal spot. I also want to point out, Fitzgerald has seen at least 10 targets in each of the last 2 games, and no less than 8 targets in each of the last 4. He has scored now in 2 of his last 4 games. The volume is trending in the right direction. This sets up to be a very good matchup for him. I just don't know if they're going to need his services much. He's going to get Nick Nelson, who grades out below average over at Pro Football Focus, a matchup that Fitzgerald has a 19% advantage rating in. So definitely worth noting there. Again, for me, it's the core play for me is Johnson, and that's about it. You can definitely consider someone like Fitzgerald as a secondary play. But that's as far as I go. Ricky Seals-Jones, worth noting, did get 9 targets last week. We've seen weeks where he gets some targets, plenty of targets, and then it dips down the following week. But just worth noting, he did get 9 targets this week. I think that has a little bit more to do with the game environment against the Chiefs than anything else. I don't think they're going to need his services this week. Any final thoughts here? There's nothing on the Oakland side for me. You can go ahead and play the Cardinals defense. It's just this Raiders offense, this team has just looked horrendous for week in and week out. The receiving situation there is a mess. Jordy Nelson is questionable with a knee injury. Martavis Bryant is out. They might be down to Brandon LaFelt here. And Seth Roberts, it's not really a good duel. So I think Cardinals defense is certainly in play this week. Any thoughts there?
So I like Rosen. I like Christian Kirk. I think that this is kind of sneaky because no pass for top of that. I just think it's like if you roster a guy like Seth Roberts and cash, if Patrick Peterson's on Brandon LaFell, he should see targets in the slot. And at that price tag, I think he's viable just because of the usage that he could possibly see. And it allows you to get up to running backs, higher end running backs.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could totally see. I like the Rosen call. My concern there is that they're not really going to need his services all that much against this Oakland Raiders team. But he definitely, there's definitely upside. The matchup is good, and both Fitzgerald and Kirk are in good matchups as well, and reasonably priced. Jalen Richard is interesting to me, but the thing is, there's so many running back options this week that it's tough to based on lineup construction, it's tough to fit them in. But he's been very involved in the passing game over the last pretty much the entire season. At least 5 targets in all but 2 games this season. Over 5 targets in 3 of his last 4. So the passing game has certainly been there for him, and if they're going to be down all these receivers, he can certainly have a busy day at catch pass out of the backfield. And this is a vulnerable Arizona run defense and a vulnerable Arizona defense against the pass here. Against the running back position. So worth noting there, definitely not a core play of mine again because of roster construction. But if you are deciding to take a different approach with your roster construction, someone like Jalen Richard should definitely be someone you're looking into because of the matchup and his run the passing game here. And also, they're expected to be chasing points on the road. Anything else here? I mean, Jared Cook obviously can be talked about because he's very, very cheap and the workload might increase. We saw 9 targets last week, but the thing with him is just it's been so inconsistent. It's really tough to trust anyone on this offense, and that's the biggest problem with me this week for this Raiders offense.
Yeah, I think that's a sharp call on Richard. We've locked, so I'm back. But no, basically, I think it's a pretty sharp call on Richard, especially at the price tag. I don't hate that at all. Jared Cook, like we said, I don't know what's going on with this offense, so the only guy I'd kind of be interested in outside of maybe one of those guys in cash, out of Seth Roberts in cash, if I go high-end running backs, is Richard, and then I'm probably not using Seth Roberts.
All right, well, now the game that you and I'm pretty sure have been waiting to talk about. This game has a 56 over-under. It's jumped up 2 points since it opened at 54 over under here. The Saints have a 32 implied team total. The Eagles have a 24 implied team total. And I'm talking about Philly versus New Orleans. Bobby, the floor is yours.
Yeah, Kamara 8,200 is going to be the chalk this week. We hit on Ingram last week as the guy we kind of wanted at that price tag in this offense. He actually kind of wanted both of them. Either way, Michael Thomas, just go back to the well there. It's a solid matchup. This total's too high. I know that they're favorites. It might lean toward the run, but I think they'll still probably be throwing the ball a decent amount in this game. On the Philly side, Carson Wentz, he's in a great spot. He has positive game script as an 8.5-point dog. Like we said, the total's 56. Philly's implied team total is 23. They're in the dome. Zach Ertz is going to be very chalky. Even at 6,600, I feel like people are going to pay up if they can. Am I wrong on that?
On paying up for who?
Paying up for Ertz. And Ertz.
I think he's gonna be chalky. I think people are gonna pay up for him.
Yeah, I think people are gonna pay up for him. And then Nelson Aguilar, I think, is going to be pretty popular at 4,100. That price is just too cheap. And then Golden Tate as well, I think, is another guy, but I'd probably lean Aguilar in this situation.
I think so far the analysis is spot on. We talked about Mark Ingram last week, and I really thought he was a price play, and I thought that the game environment was really going to suit him very well. It ended up panning out. Kamara also had a big game, but this is a week where I don't like Ingram, and I do like Kamara a ton. Eagles have been pretty good against the run this season. When you look at what they've allowed, let me see here, 564 rushing yards, which is actually tied for second fewest with the Bears. Only the Saints have allowed the fewer rushing yards this season. So 2 really good run defenses. That said, the Eagles have allowed 16 run receptions, which is tied for 5th most, 504 receiving yards to opposing backs. So a good spot and a good game environment for Alvin Kamara here. I do think that that's the way to get it done if you're going to take a running back out of this backfield. I like, again, Michael Thomas, you're always in play. He's going to see some Rasul Douglas here, which Thomas has a 26% advantage rating in. Douglas rated about average according to Pro Football Focus. I love your Golden Tate call. We didn't see much of him last week. We did see him on the sidelines for several crucial plays. I think one more week learning the playbook, learning the offensive scheme here. I think we're going to see more out of Golden Tate. He does get a dreamy matchup here against P.J. Williams, who grades out as one of the worst corners basically in the league at 36.9, the 36.9 grade. Golden Tate has a 36% advantage rating here. If he does get more snaps in and more reps in, I do think he can have a big game. I also love Alshon Jeffrey here. According to Pro Football Focus, he's going to see Eli Apple, a matchup that he has a 24% advantage rating in. I think that when you look at his price tag and you look at the volume he's been seeing, it's pretty good. 6,300 in this situation, this scenario against the Saints, who have been really bad against the pass. Like I mentioned before, they're really good against the run. So they funnel to the pass here. I think the game environment is really going to suit Alshon Jeffrey well here. I just love him at this price tag. I love these receivers. A little bit concerned about Aguilar because according to Pro, I don't know if this is how it's going to play out on Sunday, but according to Pro Football Focus, Marshawn Lattimore is going to be on Aguilar, which is concerning. Lattimore has not been the shutdown corner we're used to seeing, or he hasn't been playing as great as we're used to seeing, but still a very good corner. And Aguilar, to me, once Golden Tate gets rolling, I think he's going to kind of move to that third receiver, or maybe fourth, because you still got Ertz there, as the fourth receiving option for this team, and might not be as utilized. So I do have some concerns about Aguilar. He does come at a great price, obviously, but I think Golden Tate is really the sneaky play here because I don't think a ton of people are going to be going there. He's 5,500, which is, in my opinion, too cheap when you look at his price compared throughout the season. And I do think they're going to be utilizing him. They didn't play him a ton last week, but it was a different game environment. I think they're going to need his services this week. So I do like him a ton here. No running backs for the Eagles for me, for obvious reasons. Aside from the tough matchup, it's just very tough to figure out which one of these running backs is going to get the work. Any thoughts here on the quarterback play? I think Wentz is a very strong play at 6,300. In fact, my top play for the quarterback position here. I just think everything is lining up for a big game for him. He has thrown at least 2 touchdowns in all but one game this season. Over 20 DraftKings points in all but one game this season. Just someone that is getting it done, man. Over 300 passing yards in 2 of his last 3 games. He also can get it done with his legs. Not that he does it often, but if he needs to, he can. Give me your thoughts here on this quarterback situation for the Eagles, and is Drew Brees someone that you're going to be prioritizing this week?
I think both of these quarterbacks have to be in your player pool just because of the implied team total of the Saints and the game script for the Eagles, and the just general total being 56 in the game. I like Wentz. I feel like Wentz really just because of he has such a high floor because of how he uses his legs, and then just adding to this positive game script, I think it should correlate to good fantasy points for Wentz in this situation. Drew Brees, I don't think they're going to be able to run much, so I think it'll funnel to the pass. Michael Thomas, Kamara, those edge guys, those are the kind of guys that I'm interested in. I like both quarterbacks. I have no issue if you were to play either one.
I agree. I think that they're both good plays. Breeze has just been on another level. I don't think this is going to be a game where they're going to run a ton, so I do expect him to pass here. I do like him quite a bit this week. I like Wentz as well, man. I think both quarterbacks are viable options. I'm a little bit more bullish on Wentz than I am on Breeze. But listen, they're both phenomenal plays here. This is just a game where I want so much exposure to. All right. So since this is going to probably be the most popular game, let's do something here. Why don't you name your top 5 plays, total plays, from this game? Like, your number 1 priority to to number 5.
5. You give me a lot here.
What in this game? A lot.
I'd go Kamara.
If you want, all right. If it's 5's too much, give me top 3.
5's fine. Kamara, Ertz, Alshon, Michael Thomas, and Saints defense.
Saints defense.
2,100. Saints defense. Yep.
Wow. That one threw me off guard completely.
No, I didn't mention them, but I think that they're interesting for tournaments at that price tag. I think any team's interesting. Look, I don't love Wentz like everyone.
Listen, they have been playing better. I'm going to give that to you. They look better. I mean, at the beginning of the season, they were a disaster. But that's a gutsy call, man. This Eagles offense is loaded with weapons, man. They really are, and they have a hell of a quarterback. I don't know, man. I think
he's overrated as a quarterback. Everyone says he's this hell of a quarterback. I haven't seen I don't know. I watched him throw a pick to some Dallas linebacker on the 50-yard line last week, and it was just I don't know.
I think that Dallas defense is so underrated. Let me tell you.
I think their defense is good. I think this defense is a little bit underrated, especially the front seven. I think they have one of the best front sevens in the league. I think there'll be turnovers in this game by Carson Wentz. I think he'll throw at least one pick.
Yeah, I mean, and I wouldn't be surprised. He has at least one pick in each of the last 2 games. But let me tell you, listen, he went on a 4-game run, and there was some pretty tough defenses. At Tennessee, who I think is solid defense, against Minnesota, solid defense. At New York Giants, I mean, they're not the greatest of defenses, but they're not terrible. Against Carolina, I mean, the schedule hasn't been pleasant for Wentz, and he's still having a pretty good season. You and I will disagree there. I think he's a very, very good quarterback. I think he's going to smash in this spot. I've been wrong before, so I wouldn't be surprised if I am wrong again. But I'm going to be pretty highly exposed this week to Carson Wentz. I just think this is too good of a matchup, and
I'm not saying play Carson Wentz. I'm just saying that I like the Saints defense at 2,100. It doesn't take much to exceed in salary formats. What does that take in terms of whether they need 5-6 points? You know what I mean?
It's 5-6 points from a defense going to win you a tournament, though. For cash. If you're talking cash, okay. I'm saying tournaments. I just don't see if 5 or 6 points of defense is going to win you a big tournament.
I get that. So maybe I shouldn't have said tournaments. I think more for cap. It was more for thinking in cap.
Okay, and that's fine. And I just wanted to clarify that because, you can get 5-6 points out of them. They'll get some sacks and potentially a turnover. I get that. But yeah, it's tough, man. That's a tough call there. I mean,
why can't we have a defensive touchdown?
It can happen. It can happen. That's just so tough to predict. I'll give you my top 5 plays here. Maybe you can give me some crap for it. But I got Wentz number 1 here. Alshon Jeffrey number 2. I got Kamara 3. Michael Thomas 4, and Golden Tate 5. In that order. I really wanted to have Drew Brees in there, but I'm so bullish this week on Wentz that I just think that I'll take the $200 price difference there and use that somewhere else, especially where I think this week there's a lot of good options that are a little pricey, so tough to find value. So I think every dollar is going to count. I think we broke this game down pretty good here. Any final thoughts on this one?
I honestly, like, I think we've kind of hit on it. The Saints call is going to hold up though. They're going to be all right this week.
I hope so, man, because D
is going to be fine.
I hope so, because I know you're going to be playing them, number one. And number two, if the listeners take your advice and they bank, hey, you know what? Power to that call, man. I don't know if I can handle that on Sunday. I don't know if I can, especially it's going to be a 4:00 game. If I'm doing good in the tournament, I'm counting on the Saints defense, man. That's going to be tough.
Like, if there's going to be so much offense and there's more opportunity for a defensive touchdown in a high-paced game, correct?
You're right. Listen, I agree with that. With what you're saying. I just can't.
There's been games in the Dome where the Saints defense gets like 20 points, and there's like significant point totals. Like, I don't see like why it's like that far out of the realm of possibility. I don't know. I think Wentz will throw a pick in this game. I don't think that's crazy to say. I think that Cameron Jordan will get some sacks in this game of Carson Wentz. So at 2,100.
Thing is that they haven't scored more than 9 DraftKings points in any but one in all but one game this year. And that's that's just,
if
they haven't played that well. I mean, they're playing better. They're playing better lately. They're getting more sacks. They're getting more, the pressure to the quarterbacks, forcing more turnovers. I get that. They look a little bit better than they did earlier in the season, but this is just they're playing a really strong offense. The only thing that they have, that favors them is that
2,100.
The Eagles are pretty much going to be one-dimensional in this game, because not only is the Saints defense phenomenal against the run, but the Eagles really don't have a threatening run game. So they are going to be one-dimensional. So there is. Listen, I understand your logic, and I get
Carson,
it. I just can't. I can't
middle of the field. He never looks left. He never looks right. Or if he only throws to the middle of the field, it's insane. Like, he does not go like, I don't know. I don't know.
That's because Ertz is in the middle of the field.
I get it. I just don't. It's like Zach Ertz every play. Alshon, when they move Alshon to the slot. So like, I just feel like, I don't know. I think their defense is in a better position than people think, even though the total is what it is.
Well, at the end of the day, the Eagles don't have a threatening implied team total. It's only 24 points. It's not bad, but it's not amongst the leagues, or at least the week
a lot higher. They're 33, right?
Yeah, when you look at the Eagles' implied team total on the main slate, they're there with like the Cardinals, the Titans, the Colts. Like, no, it's not that high. When you look at in comparison to some of the other implied team totals. So I get what you're saying.
I think the salary for this is a good defense at that price tag. I wouldn't be like really excited to roster them in cash in season long this week, but I'm talking about in terms of like just the price tag. I think it's not the worst spot.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Right,
I get it.
I'm telling you,
we will listen. We will agree to disagree. We will agree to disagree on this one. It's going to happen. There's nothing wrong with that. It's going to happen. Maybe I will fire up some Saints D on your name this weekend.
Saints D, you don't like the pick.
I will not.
Don't fire up some.
I will not.
I'll take the Saints D.
You play more cash than I do, so I get where you're going with that. You're pretty much and trust me, I'm as frugal as it comes when it's referring to defenses. I look for the cheapest option pretty much each week. So I get what the thought process is there, man. All right. Hell of a show. It's always a pleasure doing this with you, bro. We will be on Sunday at 11 a.m. To make sure that we get that, we're going to go game by game with all the news, updates, and stuff going on into lock. We'll be live as we are every Sunday at footballdiehards.com. Guys, we are giving away 2 weeks free subscription here at footballdiehards.com. If you haven't signed up, if you're not a subscriber, make sure you go check it out. If you need the link, reach out to me on Twitter at Armando_Marsal. I'll provide you that. It's definitely worth it. You're going to get tons of content, everything behind the paywall, tons of information. You got Bob Harris pumping out information there, Jen Ryan, Bobby Gomes, myself, John Lobb, so many people pumping out content, really, really good content. So I definitely recommend you go there and check it out. Bobby, why don't you let everyone know where they can follow you on the Twitter machine and Instagram?
Bobby Gomes, DFS on Instagram and Twitter.
All right, man. I look forward to speaking with you on Sunday. We will definitely talk a little more Saints defense then, guys. Good luck to everyone this week, and we will be here next week.